Hi, I'm Barb Nangle. I'm the founder of Higher Power Coaching and Consulting. I want to welcome you to my podcast, Fragmented to Whole: Life Lessons from 12-Step Recovery. On this podcast, I share my experience, strength, and hope from recovery. I don't support or endorse any particular 12-step recovery fellowship, and I don't claim to speak for any of them either. My hope is that you will find my words helpful in some way, whether you're in recovery or not. This is episode 80, How to Enjoy the Holidays by Setting Boundaries Now. If you're someone who is dreading the holidays because you end up doing things you're not really interested in doing, or going places you don't really want to go, or exchanging gifts when you don't feel like it, I have got some good news for you. You get to have the kind of holidays you want to have. I'm going to start out this episode with a few freedoms that you can have by setting boundaries now for the holidays. These are the kinds of things that I didn't even know were options for me before recovery. Then I'm going to give you some tips for how to set boundaries in general, not just for the holidays. And then I will give you some sample scripts that apply those tips to some of the freedoms I'm about to list. My guess is that if you have difficulty with setting boundaries, you'll want to listen to this episode again and again and again, because there's some really good stuff here, concrete, actionable items. Here we go. Here are some freedoms you get to have. It's okay to not go home for the holidays. It's okay to change holiday traditions. It's okay to do what you want to do this holiday season. You don't have to spend the holidays with people that you don't like. You don't have to exchange gifts if you don't want to. You can choose to stay home alone for the holidays if that's what you want to do. You don't have to host a holiday event this year or ever, even if you've always done it. You don't have to live up to other people's expectations for the holidays. It's okay to refuse affection from family during the holidays. If you're not a hugger or a toucher, you don't have to. If there's somebody that tries to kiss you and you don't like being kissed or being kissed by them, you don't have to. It's okay to stay at a hotel or a motel or an Airbnb instead of at your family's home during the holidays. You don't have to talk about subjects that are private or that make you uncomfortable over the holidays. It's okay to ask for what you really want and need during the holidays. This could mean the type of gifts you want, the amount of time you want to spend with someone, the amount of alone time you want, the amount of lounging time you want to have with your family, or certain destinations you'd like to go to. And it's okay if people get mad at you for setting boundaries during the holidays. It is not the end of the world to have someone upset with you. In fact, it shows that they heard you. You deserve to enjoy the holidays just like everyone else does. You don't have to stay the whole time at a holiday event if you don't want to. You can come late and or leave early if that's what you want to do. And you don't have to explain yourself if you've changed your holiday traditions. In fact, it's never your job to convince anyone to understand your boundaries. Choosing to no longer over-explain and justify a boundary is a boundary in itself. Now, I'm going to go into those tips for setting boundaries that I mentioned. Tip number 1 is to do it promptly. Setting limits does not get easier if you wait. So if somebody sends you an invitation to something, you want to respond as quickly as makes sense to their request. This shows respect and it gives you peace of mind because it's done. The next tip is to be polite. Thank them for inviting you. If the boundary has to do with an invitation, there is no reason to be rude to people. Politeness is like the quote, grease on the wheels of social interaction. Next tip, do not lie. Whatever you say, be truthful. If you can't be completely honest, then don't say anything besides a kind no or I'm going to decline. Here's another tip. Don't apologize. You haven't done anything wrong. Even if someone tries to make you think you've done something wrong, you haven't. You can say you're sorry for missing something, but don't apologize for saying no or for setting a boundary. Another tip, depersonalize it. Think of it like this. I have a rule. This depersonalizes it. It makes it about you and not the other person. Sometimes you'll actually say, I have a new policy or I have a rule, and sometimes you won't need to come out and say those things. And I'll give you examples of both in a moment. Another tip is to give an alternative. So let's say the boundary is about declining an invitation. If you can't attend the event, you can ask, how else can we connect? Maybe you can have coffee, lunch, a phone, or a video call. If it's something else, you might ask yourself, and perhaps the other person too, if it's appropriate, how else can we compromise? So if you don't want to exchange gifts, volunteer for a committee, or host an event, think about what you can do. And in this case, I recommend you offer something alternative rather than waiting for them to ask you, well, what can you do? That way you set the terms. The last tip I have is to buy time, or the way that I usually talk about that is to say, pause. Have a personal policy of not making snap decisions. Take time to think and reflect on what you really want to do. And you can say, well, if you need an immediate answer, it will be no. All right, now I'm going to move into matching up those tips with a few of the scripts, with scripts for a few of the freedoms I mentioned at the beginning. So, freedom. It's okay to change holiday traditions. You might say something like, I'm not going to do blank this year. I'd like to try something new. It doesn't mean I don't value our old traditions. It means I want to create some new traditions. The tips I've used here is there's no lying. This is the truth. It's prompt. So if this is your situation, I recommend you have this conversation right away, like tomorrow, or maybe even today. It's also polite, and there is no apology given. Here's a recommendation for it's okay to not go home for the holidays. You might say, I'm not going to make it this year, Mom. I know you're disappointed. I am too. When the quarantine is over, we'll make time to come visit. This is prompt. Again, if this is your situation, I recommend you do this today or tomorrow. An alternative is given, it's polite, and there is no apology given. The next one, you don't have to exchange holiday gifts if you don't want to. You might say something like, I'm no longer exchanging gifts with friends, just family. What I'd really like is to spend some time with you. This is prompt. If you're going to be in this situation, again, I recommend you do it tomorrow. It's polite. There's no apology given. It's depersonalized. It's truthful, and there's an alternative given. So this one makes use of quite a few of those tips. I would add that when you say what I'd really like is to spend time with you, it really gets the point across that you value that friendship. It just isn't going to be about exchanging gifts any longer. All right, and the last one I'm going to share is you don't have to talk about subjects that are private or that make you uncomfortable. You might say something like, I don't discuss that with other people, or I'm uncomfortable with this conversation. Let's change the subject. In this case, there's no lying. This is the truth. It's prompt. The issue is addressed as it's happening, which means you don't have to endure the discomfort of a conversation you don't want to have, and you also don't have to hold on to the resentment. And it's also polite, and there is no apology given. I hope these tips and scripts and freedoms are going to allow you to enjoy the holidays by setting boundaries now. One last thing, if you're interested in learning what the CDC recommends for social distancing practices for the winter holidays, you can Google CDC Holiday Celebrations, and you'll see a variety of considerations for the holidays, including travel tips and considerations for those hosting and attending events. Here's hoping your holidays will be as joyful and relaxing as you want them to be. Talk to you next week. That's it for today. Please share this episode with anyone who might find it helpful. If you like what you've heard here, you might be interested in private coaching with me. If that sounds like you, then head on over to barbchat.net, where you can get on my calendar for a free 20-minute consultation to help you make lasting changes in your life, like I've made deep, lasting changes in my life. My ideal client is someone who is ripe for change, but I'll coach anyone who wants to be happy, joyous, and free. So if that's you, then go to barbchat.net and get on my calendar. I'd love to chat with you. Please like and subscribe to this podcast on your favorite podcast outlet. This helps other people find me. Thanks for listening.